Shabbat Shalom, everybody.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, everybody.
Shabbat Shalom.
We thank the Most High Yahuwah for allowing us to come out another set apart Shabbat, to come together to fellowship and break bread. And, you know, we thank Him for all that He's done for us this week and how He's carried us throughout the week, brought us safely to today with no hurt, harm, or danger. And we just thank Him for that. And at this time, we're going to go ahead and get started with our service. And we're going to ask everyone to face the east, which would be this way. And we're going to have the blowing of the shofar by our senior Moreh, Moreh Kasadaba. And we're going to have our prayer by Aliyahu. He's going to pray us in. Okay. So we're going to face the east and look towards Jerusalem as Moreh blows the shofar.
Thank you once again for bringing us together, for keeping us throughout the week and and bringing us together for your set apart day. We ask that you baruch this lesson, have our minds and ears open for the word that's about to be spoken. May your ruach really be in the presence of all of us, that we have the true understanding of your word today. We thank you through your begotten Son's name, Yashra'al HaMashiach. Hallelujah.
Hallelujah. Hallelujah.
So at this time, without any further ado, we are going to go ahead and get in our lesson. And we're going to continue from last week's lesson. We're going to try to close everything out today before we go into Yashra'al 53. And what we want to focus on is, we're looking at the Moedim to see how they are connected with or connected to the Melchizedek covenant. And that's very important because you're going to hear a lot of things spoken by Hamashiach Yahusha or Apostle Shaul, and unless you have this understanding, you're not going to see the importance of why they're saying these things. And a lot of things will be done, and we're going to go back and look at these things and see why and how they were established from the beginning. So we are going to ask Moreh Kasadaba, if you will. Let's go to Bereshit 15.
Okay, we're going to Bereshit, the book of Genesis, the 15th chapter.
Starting at the first verse, I'm sorry.
Bereshit, the 15th chapter, verse 1. After these things, the word of Yahuwah came unto Abram in a vision, saying, Fear not, Abram, I am thy shield and thy exceeding great reward. And Abram said, Sovereign Yahuwah, what wilt thou give me, seeing I go childless, and the steward of my house is this Eliezer of Damascus? And Abram said, Behold, to me thou hast given no seed, And lo, one born in my house is my heir. And behold, the word of Yahuwah came unto him, saying, This shall not be thine heir, but he that shall come forth out of thy own bowels shall be thine heir. And he brought him forth abroad, and said, Look now toward Shamayim, or heaven, and tell the stars, if thou be able to number them. And he said unto him, So shall be thy seed, or so shall thy seed be. And he believed in the Father, or Yahuwah, and he counted it to him for righteousness.
He did what?
And he believed in the Father, or Yahuwah, and he counted it to him for righteousness. And he said unto him, I am Yahuwah that brought you or thee out of Ur of the Chaldees, to give thee this land to inherit it. And he said unto the sovereign Yahuwah, Whereby shall I know that I shall inherit it? And he said unto him, Take me a heifer of 3 years old, and a she-goat of 3 years old, and a ram of 3 years old, and a turtle dove, and a young pigeon. And he took unto him all these, and divided them in the midst, and laid each piece one against another. But the birds divided he not. And when the fowls came down upon the carcasses, Abram drove them away. And when the sun was going down, a deep sleep fell upon Abram. And lo, a horror of great darkness fell upon him. And he said unto Abram, Know of a surety that your seed shall be a stranger in a land that is not theirs, and shall serve them, and they shall afflict them 400 years. And said, That nation whom they shall serve will I judge, and afterward shall they come out with great substance. And you shall go to thy fathers in peace. Thou shalt be buried in a good old age. But in the 4th generation they shall come hither or here again, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet full. And it came to pass that when the sun went down and it was dark, behold, a smoking furnace and a burning lamp that passed between those pieces.
Stop right there. And it came to pass that when the sun went down and it was dark, behold, a smoking furnace and a burning lamp that passed between those pieces. And we identify this as who?
Yashra'al.
Hamashiach, Yahusha. Okay.
Okay, so in that same day, Yahuwah made a covenant with Abram, saying, Unto your seed have I given this land, from the river of Egypt into the great river, the river Euphrates, the Kenites and the Kenizzites and the Kadamites and the Hittites and the Perizzites and the Rephaims and the Amorites and the Canaanites and the Girgashites and the Jebusites.
Okay. So we see now that there were some promises made to Abraham. And after those promises were made, it say in that same day, what happened? There was a covenant made, right?
Yep.
Okay. Covenant made with Abraham. Now let's go over to Exodus 12.
Okay, we go into the book of Exodus, the book of Shemot, the 12th chapter.
Starting at verse 1.
Okay, verse 1. And Yahuwah spoke unto Moshe, and Aharon in the land of Egypt, saying, This month shall be unto you the beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year to you. Speak you unto all the congregation of Yashra'al, saying, In the 10th day of this month they shall take them every man a lamb, according to the house of their fathers, a lamb for a house. And if the household be too little for the lamb, let him and his neighbor next unto his house take it according to the number of the souls. Every man according to his eating shall make your account for the lamb. Your lamb should be without blemish, a male of the first year. You should take it from the sheep or from the goats. And you should keep it up until the 14th day of the same month. And the whole assembly of the congregation of Yashra'al should kill it between the evening. And they should take of the blood and strike it on the 2 side posts and on the upper doorposts of the house wherein they shall eat it. And they shall eat the flesh in that night, roast with fire and unleavened bread, and with bitter herbs they shall eat it. Eat not of it raw, nor sodden or boiled in water, but roast it with fire, his head with his legs, and with the puritance thereof. And you shall let nothing of it remain until the morning. And that which remaineth of until the morning you shall burn with fire. And thus shall you eat it, with your loins girded, your shoes on your feet, and your staff in your hand. And you should eat it in haste. It is the fathers or Yahuwah's Passover. For I was passed through the land of Egypt this night, and will smite all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both man and beast, and against all, the Elohim of Egypt I will execute judgment. I am the father of Yahuwah. And the blood should be to you for a token upon the house or the houses where you are, and when I see the blood, I will pass over you, and the plague shall not be upon you to destroy you when I smite the land of Egypt.
For when I see what? The blood, I will do what? Pass over you. Now, when we look at the Moedim, first and foremost, he told us that these things should be a mikra, or in English we look at that word as a rehearsal. So if you're rehearsing something, you'll gain familiarity and understanding of something to perfect one day. You know what I'm saying? So when we look at the Moedim, there's a reason why they were to constantly and continually do these things year after year after year after year after year. They're rehearsing. That's very important to know that they are rehearsing.
Right.
Now, let's go over Moreh to Exodus 23 and 15.
The book of Shemot, Exodus 23, verse 15. You shall keep the feast of unleavened bread. Then it has in parentheses, thou shalt eat unleavened bread 7 days, as I commanded you, in the time appointed of the month of Abib, for in it thou camest out from Egypt, and none shall appear before me empty.
Okay. Now we're looking at unleavened bread. So far you should have noticed something. Not once has there been anything called a Levitical priesthood mentioned. with Passover, nor has it been mentioned with unleavened bread, which the two kind of are the same. When we say Passover, Pesach, we know we're also speaking of unleavened bread as well. So, why are these things being mentioned and being looked at as a rehearsal? What are they preparing us for? Now, I'm going to stop right there and let's go look at something, because I don't want to jump into unleavened bread too fast. Let's look at 1 Peter 2:9. 1 Peter 2:9.
Okay, we have 1 Peter, key for the 2nd chapter, verse 9. Okay, we got this Aramaic version here. But you are a chosen race, who ministers as priests to the kingdom, a set-apart people, a congregation redeemed to announce the praises of him who have called you from darkness to his transcending light. I'll read it the other way. So I guess I'm confused here. First Peter 2:9, King James Version. But you are a chosen generation, a royal priesthood, a set-apart nation, a peculiar people, that you should show forth the praises of him who have called you out of darkness into his marvelous light.
So you are what? A royal priesthood. You're set apart what? Yeah. Nation. Okay. Let's go look at Revelations 1 and 6.
The book of Revelation, the 1st chapter, verse 6. And have made us kings and priests unto Yahuwah or Elohim and his Father. To him be esteem and dominion forever and ever. Hallelujah.
Has made us what? King. And what?
And priest.
And priest. Did he say we were what? A royal priesthood? Now, what we're looking at, you have to see why his blood is so important. Now, when we look at this, we're going to let's go to 5 and 10 as well, Moreh. Revelation 5 and 10.
Revelation 5. Chapter 5, verse 10. And has made us into our Elohim kings and priests, and we shall reign on the earth.
He has made us what? Kings and priests, and we shall what? Reign on the earth. I wonder which order this will be under. The Melchizedek. It'll be under Melchizedek order. Because remember, all of this stuff, Pesach, all this stuff took place before a pre-Levitical priesthood. But there had to be a priesthood in place. What would that priesthood have been? It would have been the Melchizedek priesthood. the same priesthood that we are of, the same priesthood that Hamashiach's blood was shed to bring us back unto that. Now, when we look at that, it's imperative that we get a good picture and see what's going on with Hamashiach. Now, let's go to Matthew 26.
You said Matthew 26?
Mm-hmm. Starting at verse 1.
And it came to pass, when Mashiach had finished all these sayings, he said unto his Talmudim, or his disciples, you know that after 2 days is the feast of Pesach, and the Son of Man is betrayed to be crucified. Then answered together the chief priests and the scribes and the elders of the people unto the place or palace of the high priest, who was called Caiaphas, and consulted that they might take the Mashiach by trickery or subtlety, and kill him. But they said, not on the feast day, lest there be an uproar among the people. Now when the Mashiach was in Bethany, in the house of Simon the leper, there came unto him a woman having an alabaster box of very precious ointment, and poured it on his head as he sat at meat. And when his disciples saw it, they had indignation or hatred, saying, to what purpose is this waste? For this ointment might have been sold for much, and given to the poor. When the Mashiach understood it, he said unto them, why trouble you the woman? For she hath wrought a good work upon me. For you have the poor always with you, but me you have not always. For in that she hath poured this ointment on my body, she did it for my burial. Verily I say unto you, wheresoever this gospel or good news shall be preached in the whole world, there also this woman have done be told for a memorial of her.
So right there, what's going on with this woman and what's going on with Hamashiach? So Hamashiach is the lamb, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what is she doing?
Preparing
Him to be sacrificed.
She's preparing the lamb for what?
To be
Sacrifice. Keep that thought in mind. She's preparing the lamb for sacrifice. Go ahead, Moreh.
For you have, verse 11, for you have the poor always with you, but me you have not always. For in that she have poured this ointment on my body, she did it for my burial. Verily I say unto you, wheresoever this gospel shall be preached in the whole world, there shall also this woman have done be told for a memorial of her. Then one of the 12, called Judas Iscariot, went into the chief priests and said unto them, what will you give me, and I would deliver him the Mashiach unto you? And they convened or covenant with him for 30 pieces of silver. And from that time he sought opportunity to betray the Mashiach. Now the first day of the feast of unleavened bread, the disciples came to the Mashiach, saying unto him, where wilt thou that we prepare for you to eat the Passover? And he said, Go into the city to such a man, and say unto him, The master saith, My time is at hand. I will keep the Passover at thy house with my disciples. And the disciples did as the Mashiach had appointed them, and they made ready the Passover. And when the evening was come, he sat down with the 12, and as they did eat, he said, Verily I say unto you, that one of you shall betray me. And they were exceedingly sorrowful, and began every one of them to say unto him, Sovereign, is it I? And he answered and said, He that dippeth his hand with me in the dish, the same shall betray me. The Son of Man goeth as it is written of him. But woe unto that man by whom the Son of Man is betrayed. It had been better or been good for that man if he had not been born. Then Judas, which betrayed him, answered and said, Master, is it I? The Mashiach said unto him, You have said, which we said correctly. And as they were eating, the Mashiach took bread, and he blessed it, and broke it, and gave to the disciples, and said, Take, eat, this is my body. And he took the cup, and gave thanks, and gave it to them, saying, drink you all of it. For this is my blood of the New Testament, or the renewed covenant, which is shed for many for the remission of sins. But I say unto you, I will not drink henceforth of the fruit of the vine until the day which I drink it new with you in my Father's kingdom. And when they had sung a hymn, they went out into the Mount of Olives. Then said the Mashiach unto them, You shall be offended because of me this night. For it is written, I will smite the shepherd, and the sheep of the flock shall be scattered abroad. But after I am risen again, I will go before you into Galilee. Peter answered and said unto him, Though all men shall be offended because of you, yet will I never be offended. The Mashiach said unto him, Verily I say unto you, that this night, before the cock crow, or the rooster crows, thou shalt deny me 3 times. Peter said unto him, Though I should die with you, yet will I not deny thee. Likewise also said all the disciples. Then came the Mashiach with them unto a place called Gethsemane, and said unto the disciples, Sit you here while I go and pray there. And he took with him Peter and the 2 sons of Zebedee, and began to be sorrowful and very heavy. Then said he unto them, My soul is exceedingly sorrowful, even unto death. Tarry you here and watch. Okay, and watch with me. And he went a little further, and fell on his face and prayed, saying, O my Father, if it be possible, let this cup pass from me.
If it be possible, let this cup pass from me.
Nevertheless, not as I will, but as thy will. And he cometh into his disciples, and findeth them asleep, and saith unto Peter, What? Could you not watch with me 1 hour? Watch and pray, that you enter not into temptation. The Ruach indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak. He went away again the 2nd time, and prayed, saying, O my Father, if this cup may not pass away from me, except I drink it, thy will be done. And he came and found he found them asleep again, for their eyes were heavy. And he left them and went again, and he prayed the 3rd time, saying the same words. Then came he to his disciples and said unto them, Sleep on now, and take your rest. Behold, The hour is at hand, and the Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners.
That's good. So what we're seeing now is Hamashiach, and you see a picture of individuals what? Sleeping. Israel was always caught in that position, sleeping. He told Israel they knew not the hour of their visitation. So we see all of this happening at Pesach, the Passover. You see him enter into the Garden of Gethsemane. Then you see him ask his father to do what? If it's his will to remove that cup from him. And we discussed earlier in the lesson that this cup is a cup or a betrothal cup. It's all associated with a marriage. Now, let's look at something a little closer. Let's go to John 13. Because Luke gives you the same, I don't want to read it because it gives you the same picture of what we just read.
John 13.
Yes. And we'll start at the first verse.
Now before the feast of Passover, when the Mashiach knew that his hour was come, that he should depart out of the world unto the Father, having loved his own, which were in the world, he loved them unto the end. And supper being ended, it has in parentheses, the adversary having now put into the heart of Judas Iscariot, Simon's son, to betray him. Verse 3, the Mashiach, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hand, and that he was come from Elohim, and went to Elohim. The Mashiach rises from supper, and laid aside his garment, and took a towel, and girded himself. After that, he poured water into a basin, and began to wash the talmidim, or the disciples' feet, and to wipe them with the towel wherewith he was girded.
Stop right there, Moreh. So when is all of this taking place, y'all?
Talking about like when?
Mm-hmm.
Before Passover?
So all of this is centered around what?
Before Passover.
Right, Passover,
Mm-hmm.
a Pesach. Okay, that's what I want y'all to see. All of this, you notice when you read in different books, all of it doesn't go into this account, so that's why you have to read every account so you can get what? The whole story or the full picture. At what point in the previous scriptures we read about him washing the disciples' feet? We didn't, right? Okay, continue reading more.
Verse 5, after that he poured water into a basin, and he began to wash the disciples' feet, and to wipe them with the towel wherewith he was girded. Then cometh he to Simon Peter. And Peter said unto him, Sovereign, doest thou wash my feet? The Mashiach answered and said unto him, What I do, you know is not now, but thou shalt know hereafter.
But what I do, thou knowest not now, but thou shalt know here what? After. Go ahead, Mark.
Peter said unto him, Thou shalt never wash my feet. The Mashiach answered him, If I wash you not, thou hast no part with me. Simon Peter said unto him, Sovereign, not my feet only, but also my hands and my head. The Mashiach said unto him, He that is washed need not except to wash his feet, but is clean ever with. and you are clean, but not all. For he knew who should betray him. Therefore said he, you are not all clean. So after he had washed their feet and had taken his garment and was set down again, he said unto them, know you what I have done to you? You call me master and sovereign, and you say well, for so am I. If I then, your sovereign and master, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I have given you an example that you should do as I have done to you. Verily, verily, I say unto you, the servant is not greater than his sovereign, neither is he that is sent greater than he that sent him. If you know these things, happy are you if you do them. I speak not of you all. I know whom I have chosen, but that the scripture might be fulfilled, he that eateth bread with me hath lifted up his heel against me. Now I tell you before it come, that when it come to pass, you may believe that I am he. Verily, verily, I say unto you, he that receiveth whomsoever I send, receiveth me. Verse 20 again. Verily, verily, I say unto you, he that receiveth whomsoever I send, receiveth me. And he that receiveth me, receiveth him that sent me. The Mashiach had thus said, because he was troubled in spirit, and testified and said, verily, verily, I say unto you, that one of you shall betray me.
That's good right there. So we see a lot going on and centered around Pesach, commonly called Passover. Now, you had a meal that you've seen. You've seen a lamb or individual being anointed. You have seen feet being washed. Why is all of this taking place? And why is all of this going on and centered around a certain or particular day? Now, we just read in Bereshit of Genesis 15 about Abraham. We saw that there was a conversation and dialogue between Yahuwah and Abraham. There were promises made. Then you see in that same day, or in that same day, a covenant was made. You had someone or something to walk between the pieces. Now, all of that was Bereshit 15. Let's go over to Bereshit 18. Because I want to be able to get you to look at some things that you might read in the Brit Kadashah, the New Testament, but be able to look back and know why these things are being done, why the language they're using is being used, and see if all of this was already pre-Levitical. Bereshit 18, let's start at verse 1.
Okay, Bereshit, the book of Genesis, the 18th chapter, verse 1. And the sovereign appeared unto him, which is Abram, in the plains of Mamre.
Who appeared unto Abram?
You.
Okay.
In the plains of Mamre, and he sat, which is Abram, or Abraham at this time, and he sat in the tent door in the heat of the day. And he lifted up his eyes and looked, and lo, 3 men stood by him. And when he saw them, he ran to meet them from the tent door and bowed himself toward the ground and said, my sovereign, if now I have found favor in your sight, pass not away, I pray thee, from thy servant. Let a little water, I pray you, be fetched and wash your feet.
Okay, read that part again.
Let a little water, I pray you, be fetched and wash your feet.
Okay. Go ahead.
And rest yourselves under the tree. And I will fetch a morsel of bread,
I will fetch a morsel of what?
of bread,
Of bread.
and comfort your hearts. Afterwards you should pass on, and therefore are you come to your servant. And they said, so do as I have said. And Abram hastened unto the tent, and Sarah said, make ready quickly 3 measures of fine meal, kneaded, and make cakes upon the hearth. And Abram ran into the herd and fetched a calf, tender and good, and gave it to a young man, and he hastened to dress it. And he took butter and milk and the calf which he had dressed, and set it before them. And he stood by them under the tree, and they did eat.
He stood by the what? Under the tree, and they did eat. Go ahead, Moreh.
And they said unto him, where is Sarah thy wife? And he said, behold, in the tent. And he said, I will certainly return unto thee according to the time of life.
Stop right there. Why is he inquiring about Sarah? Hmm? No, don't be scared now.
To give him an ear,
Okay, to do what?
to
Say it loud so they can hear you.
answer Abram's request about an heir.
Answers Abram's request about an heir. Because remember when you read in what? Genesis 15, what was the discussion? Abraham told him, I don't have a son. Eleazar was mentioned. And he said, his feet will come, his heir will come from where?
Sarah.
Or from his bow? Okay then. Go ahead, Warren.
And he said, I will certainly return unto thee according to the time of life. And lo, Sarah thy wife shall have a son. And Sarah heard it in the tent door, which was behind him. Now Abram and Sarah were old and well stricken in age, and it ceased to be with Sarah after the manner of women. Therefore Sarah laughed within herself, saying, after I am waxed old, shall I have pleasure, my sovereign being old also. And the sovereign said unto Abram, wherefore did Sarah laugh, saying, shall I of a surety bear a child which am old? Is anything too hard for the sovereign? At that time appointed will I return unto thee according to the time of life, and Sarah shall have a son. Then Sarah denied, saying, I laugh not, for she was afraid. And he said, no, but thou didst laugh. And the men rose up from thence and looked toward Sodom, and Abram went with them to bring them on the way. And the sovereign said, shall I hide from Abram that thing which I do? Seeing that Abram shall surely become a great and mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth shall bless him. For I know him, that he shall command his house, he shall command his children and his household after him, that they should keep the ways of the sovereign, to do justice and judgment, and the sovereign may bring upon Abram that which has spoken of him. And the sovereign said, because the cry of Sodom and Gomorrah is great, and because their sin is very grievous, I will go down now and see whether they have done altogether according to the cry of it, which is come unto me, and if not, I will know.
So we can stop right there. So what you see is the things that were spoken to Abraham in Genesis 15, now you see the Most High. What is he doing? Now he has come to Abram once again, because now he's speaking to Abram concerning the promises which he had previously made. There was a covenant made. So now you see the washing of the feet. You see a sacrifice being made, or a cattle being killed, a calf to be eaten. You see bread being made. So now you have what? Remember, they entered in the covenant already. So what are you seeing take place now?
Covenant meeting?
A covenant confirming meal. Very important. So now, when we go, also should be noted that this is on when you see him speaking to Abraham. Most people don't realize that Isaac was also born when?
Were you born before this?
Was Isaac born before then?
No.
No,
No.
I'm sorry.
But you're going to see that Isaac was born also on what? One of the Moreh. But you see something happen with Abraham. You see all of this stuff taking place. This is why when you're looking at Pesach, and when we go into the other Moreh, you're going to see how they were connected to the Melchizedek covenant, or the Melchizedek order as well. So, let's look at Shemot 19. Exodus 19. We're going to start at verse 1 more when you get it.
Okay. You know what's so important too is that when you look at Bereshit, the Genesis, the 18th chapter, we now have Abraham moving from one state to the next, where he's no longer Abram, but now Abraham. And we see the relationship that the father now has with Abraham, and what was actually commissioned to Abraham to tell his children on how they're supposed to keep this relationship. Just like we had read in Genesis 18 and 18, just to read it just one more time. It's saying, seeing that verse 17, the sovereign said, shall I hide from Abraham that thing which I do? Seeing that Abraham shall surely become a great and mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth shall bless him. For I know him, which is Abraham, that he shall command his children and his household after him, that they should keep the way of the sovereign. So we have to ask ourselves, just like Moreh's been explaining for the last couple of months here, what then now is the way of the Father, being that there was no such thing as a Levitical priesthood?
Remember, he said justice and judgment.
Yeah, all these things here, and they can be definitely outlined in the in Exodus the 20th chapter. We begin to look at what we're calling the 10 Commandments. For I know him, that he will command his children and his household after him, that they should keep the way of the Father, and to do justice and judgment, that Yahuwah may bring upon Abraham that which he hath spoken. So we just find, now Abraham is called a friend in later scriptures. Nothing was hid from Abraham, and again, we did not have anything as a Levitical order at that time. Now, we was going to the book of Shemot, Exodus the 19th chapter, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, Exodus, the 19th chapter, verse 1. In the 3rd month, when the children of Yashra'al were gone forth out of the land of Egypt, the same day came they into the wilderness of Sinai. And they were departed from Rephidim, and were come into the desert of Sinai. and had pitched in the wilderness, and there Israel camped before the mount. And Moses went up unto Elohim, and the sovereign called unto him out of the mountain, saying, Thus shalt thou say unto the house of Jacob and the children of Yashra'al, You have seen what I did unto the Egyptians, and how I bare you on eagle's wings, and brought you unto myself. Now therefore, if you will obey my voice indeed, and keep my covenant, then you shall be a peculiar treasure unto me above all people, for all the earth is mine, and you shall be unto me a kingdom of priests.
You should be what?
You should be unto me a kingdom of priests.
So what did we read in Revelations? Did it not say the same thing?
Mm-hmm.
Is all of this pre-Levitical law?
Yes.
Okay. All this is going to make a whole lot of sense.
And you should be unto me a kingdom of priests, a set apart nation. These are the words which you shall speak unto the children of Yashra'al. And Moses came and called the elders of the people, and laid before their faces all these words which the Father had commanded him, Moses. And all the people answered together and said, All that the Father hath spoken, we will do.
Stop right there. So all that what Father has spoken, said what? We will do.
Mm-hmm.
So what you see here is what Hamashiach was saying, if it be thy will, remove this cup from me. This is the cup he's speaking of. Because right at this very moment, what do you have here? Remember he said, I bared you on eagle's wings?
Right.
Then he said, I brought you unto what? Myself. What is he saying when he said, I brought you unto myself?
You became my people.
Or you became my lady, my main squeeze of my baby. That's what it means to bring you unto myself. So when he brought her unto himself, he now has spoken some things to her. What we, in the word they call it sweet nothing. He spoke sweet words into her ear. And what did she say? I like that. Go back and tell him, I'll be his baby. I'm his. They weren't married yet, but what had they just done? They had just committed to each other. She made a commitment at that moment. Did she say, go back and tell him all that he said, I will what? I'll do that. She committed.
Well.
So, with that, you see a commitment. Now, you see a betrothal taking place. They've not married yet, have they? But they have done what?
Committed to each other.
Committed to each other. And the woman told him, I'll commit to you. So now, they are working their way towards what?
Marriage.
To a marriage. It's just like in the natural. They have what is called an engagement. And what is engagement for? Engagement, you're making what? Now you're saying enough of the playing around and all the foolishness. I want to commit to you. You commit and then you do what? You set a date, don't you? But what do you do until that date comes?
You prepare.
You're preparing for what?
Marriage.
The marriage. So, what we see here is all of this is taking place before that anything called a Levitical order. So now you see a betrothal taking place. And go ahead, continue reading on.
we have in verse 8, and all the people answered together and said, all that the sovereign has spoken, we will do. And Moses returned the words of the people unto the father of the sovereign. And the sovereign said unto Moses, lo, I come unto thee in a thick cloud, that the people may hear when I speak with you, and believe you forever. And Moses told the words of the people unto the sovereign. And the sovereign said unto Moses, go unto the people, and set them apart today and tomorrow, and let them wash their clothes, and be ready against the third day. For the third day of the sovereign will come down in the sight of all the people upon Mount Sinai. And when thou shalt set bounds unto the people round about, saying, take heed to yourselves that you go not up unto the mount, or touch the border of it. Whosoever touches the mount shall surely be put to death. There shall not a hand touch it, but he shall surely be stoned or shot through. Whether it be beast or man, it shall not live. When the trumpet shall sound, long, they shall come up to the mount. And Moses went down from the mount unto the people, and sanctified the people, and they washed their clothes. And he said unto the people, be ready against the third day, come not at your wives. And it came to pass on the third day in the morning, there was a thick thunder and lightnings and a thick cloud upon the mount, and the voice of the trumpet exceeding loud, so that all the people that was in the camp trembled. And Moses came and brought forth the people out of the camp to meet Elohim, and they stood at another part of the mount, and the mount was altogether on a smoke, because the Father descended upon it in the fire, and the smoke thereof ascended as the smoke of a furnace, and the whole mount quaked greatly. And when the voice of the trumpet sounded long, and waxed louder and louder, Moses spoke, and Elohim answered him by a voice. And the sovereign came down upon Mount Sinai at the top of the mount, and the sovereign called Moses unto the top of the mount, and Moses went up. And the Father said unto Moses, go down and charge the people, lest they break through unto the sovereign to gaze, and many of them perish. And let the priests also which come near to the sovereign sanctify themselves, lest the sovereign break forth upon them. And Moses said unto the sovereign, the people cannot come up to Mount Sinai, for thou hast charged us, saying, set bounds upon the mount, and sanctify it. And the sovereign said unto him, away, get thee down, and thou shalt come up, thou and Aaron with you. But let not the priests and the people break through to come up unto the sovereign, lest he break forth upon them. So Moses went down unto the people and spoke unto them.
Okay, so what you see here is a whole bunch of events going on. Anybody know what day this is, or what particular day? Being more specific, what day is the Sinai account taking place on? Shavuot. And you see a whole bunch going on here, right? Let's go to Acts, the 2nd chapter. Starting at verse 1.
Okay. When the day of Pentecost was fully come,
And Pentecost is what?
Fully come.
What day is commonly called Pentecost? Pentecost is the Greek name for what? Shavuot.
50. Right, 50 days, right, Shavuot. And when the, all right, go ahead.
Oh no, you good, Mark.
Okay. And when the day of Pentecost was fully come, they were all with one accord in one place. And suddenly there came a sound from Shamayim as of a rushing mighty wind, and it filled all the house where they were sitting. And there appeared unto them cloven tongues, like as a fire, and it sat upon each of them, and they were all filled with the set apart spirit, and began to speak with other tongues as the Spirit gave them utterance. And there were dwelling in Jerusalem Yahudims, or Jews, devout men out of every nation under heaven. And when this was noise abroad, the multitude came together and were confounded, because that every man heard them speak in his own language. And they were all amazed, and marveled, saying one to another, Behold, are not all these which speak Galileans? And how hear we every man in our language, in our own language, wherein we are born, Parthians, and Medes, and Elamites, and dwellers of Mesopotamia, and of Judea, and Cappadocia, and Pontus, and Asia, Phrygia, and Pamphylia, and Egypt, and in the parts of Libya about Cyrene, strangers of Rome, Yahudims, and proselytes, Cretes, and Arabians, we do hear them speak in our tongues the wonderful works of Elohim. And they were all were all amazed, and were in doubt, saying one to another, What mean this? Others mocking said, These men are full of new wine. But Peter, standing up with the 11, lifted up his voice and said unto them, You men of Judea, and all you that dwell in Jerusalem, be this known unto you, and hearken unto my words. For these are not drunken as you suppose, seeing it being but the third hour of the day. But this is that which was spoken by the prophet Joel.
This is that was spoken of by the prophet Joel.
And it came to pass in the last days, saith the Father, I will pour out my flesh, or my spirit upon all flesh, and your sons and your daughters shall prophesy, and your young men shall see visions, and your old men shall dream dreams. And on my servants and on my handmaidens I will pour out in those days of my ruach, and they shall prophesy. And I will show wonders in Shamayim above, and signs in the earth beneath, blood and fire and vapor of smoke.
Okay, that's good right there. All of this is going to take place. Is it going to take place with his sons, or with his sons and his daughters?
Sons and daughters.
Sons and daughters. Okay, now let's go jump back over to Shemot. Now, all of this Moreh just read took place when?
Pentecost.
On Pentecost or Shavuot. Let's get in the habit of, we're going to get in the habit of using the Hebrew word, Shavuot. Okay then, let's go over to Shemot, Exodus 32 and 20, start at verse 27.
You know what's interesting too is that did the sin of the golden calf happen yet?
Not yet.
Nope.
Okay. 32:27. And he said unto them, Thus saith the Father Elohim of Yashra'al, put every man his sword, that's the right one?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Put every man his sword by his side, and go in and out from the gate to gate throughout the camp, and slay every man his brother, and every man his companion, and every man his neighbor. And the children of Levi did accordingly to the words of Moshe, and there fell of the people that day about 3,000 men.
There fell what?
3,000.
About 3,000 men. About 3,000 men.
About 3,000 men. What had happened at this point? Now all of a sudden, remember, it was Shavuot, right? Something happened. Remember they entered into what? Covenant?
Covenant.
Well, the covenant was being fulfilled that was promised to Abraham at Sinai. Remember it passed on to Isaac, but then to his seed, Jacob. And Jacob what? Sons, which became the 12 tribes of Israel. So at Sinai, something has taken place. What has taken place that 3,000 men have died?
Oh,
Hmm?
Already said.
Yeah, Moreh just said it.
Golden Calf.
The golden calf. Because I'm putting teeth in there. The golden calf. So because of the golden calf, now you see what? 3,000 have died. And what day is this? Shavuot.
Sorry.
Now let's go back over to Acts, the 2nd chapter.
Yeah, 3,000.
Chapter 2, verse, we'll start at 40. We'll read 40 and 41.
Yeah, 3,000 souls.
We would like to read it first, though.
Okay, the book of Acts, the 2nd chapter, verses 40 and 41.
So what's taking place in the book of Acts at this time? What event is going on?
Shavuot.
Shavuot.
And with many other words did he testify and exhort, saying, Save yourselves from this untoward generation. Then they that gladly received his word were baptized, and the same day there were added about 3,000 men.
At the first Shavuot, there were about how many
3,000.
taken or killed? 3,000. When we go back to the book of Shemot, or Exodus. When we get to the Brit Kadashah, the New Testament, when Shavuot or Pentecost had fully come, how many were added to the congregation?
3,000.
3,000. On the exact same day, many years apart. 3,000 taken, 3,000 added. Now, what else did you notice about Acts the 2nd chapter? Y'all remember all of the thick cloud, the lightning, and the fire at Sinai on Pentecost? How was Acts the 2nd chapter described in the upper room? Was it not the exact same characteristics of what was going on? Let's read that one more time, Moreh. We're not going to read the whole thing.
Exodus?
The 2nd chapter of Acts.
No, 2nd chapter, okay.
We're just going to go up some. Because I think they got a good picture of Exodus and know what's going on at Sinai there.
Okay. So you want to start at 1 again?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And when the day of Shavuot was fully come, they were all with one accord in one place. And suddenly there came a sound from Shamayim, or heaven, as of a rushing mighty wind, and it filled all the house where they were sitting. And there appeared unto them cloven tongues, like as of fire, and it sat upon each of them. And they were all filled with the set-apart spirit, and began to speak with other tongues, as the Ruach gave them utterance. And they were dwelling at Jerusalem, Yahudim or Jews, devout men, out of every nation under heaven.
That was dwelling what at Jerusalem?
Devout men, or Yahudim,
Devout men or Jews.
out of every nation under heaven.
Out of every nation under heaven?
Mm-hmm.
Out of every nation under heaven. Why is that important?
All tribes coming together.
Right, that's all of the scattered come together, because what was the commandment that these days, Pesach, Shavuot, first, all of these days, things were to take place where? In Jerusalem, but more specifically, there are 3 more then that all who have to report.
Amen.
All the men. So you have all of these men, they're now devout men of other nations, so to speak, or all of a sudden I got Greeks over here that are ethnos Greeks, and all of a sudden they become devout. No. It's our people who are scattered into all of these places who understand that the command was 3 times a year, the men should report to Jerusalem for these 3 more days. And anybody know what 3 they are?
Well, definitely Shavuot.
Okay.
Is it Pesach?
Mm-hmm.
That's a good one.
The Feast of Sukkot.
Okay. Which 3 is that?
Pesach, Sukkot, and Shavuot.
Okay. Now, can we see how these Mordim are connected to something before the Levitical order? Now, let's go back. Let's go to let's look at Exodus 12 again.
Exodus 12. Okay, Exodus, or the book of Shemot, the 12th chapter, verse 1.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, 12 and 1. And the sovereign spoke unto Moses and Aharon in the land of Egypt, saying, This month shall be unto you the beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year to you. Speak you unto all the congregation of Yashra'al, saying, In the 10th day of this month they shall take to them every man a lamb according to the house of their fathers, a lamb for a house, or a kid for a house. And if the household be too little for the lamb, let him and all his neighbors next unto his house take it according to the number of the souls. Every man according to his eating shall make your account for the lamb. Your lamb shall be without blemish. A male of the first year, you shall take it from the sheep or from the goats. And you should keep it up until the 14th day of the same month, and the whole assembly of the congregation of Yashra'al shall kill it in the evening, or between the evenings. And they should take of the blood and strike it on the 2 side posts and on the upper doorposts of the house wherein they should eat it. And they should eat the flesh in the night, roast with fire, and unleavened bread, and with bitter herbs they shall eat it. Eat not of it raw, nor sodden at all with water, but roast with fire, his head with his legs, and with the puritans thereof. And you shall let nothing of it remain until the morning, and that which remaineth of it until the morrow you shall burn with fire. And thus shall you eat it, with your loins girded, and shoes on your feet, and your staff in your hand. And you shall eat it in haste. This is the Father's Passover. For I will pass through the land of Egypt this night, and will smite all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both man and beast. And against all the Elohims of Egypt I will execute judgment. I am your sovereign, or I am the sovereign. And the blood shall be unto you for a token upon the house where you are. And when I see the blood, I shall pass over you, and the plague shall not be upon you to destroy you, when I smite the land of Egypt. And this day shall be unto you for a memorial, and you shall keep it a feast to the sovereign. Therefore your generations, throughout your generations, and you shall keep it a feast by an ordinance forever. 7 days shall you eat unleavened bread. Even the first day you shall put away leaven out of your houses.
Okay, 7 days you shall do what? Eat unleavened bread. Even the first day you shall put any leaven out of your what? Houses. Go ahead, Moreh.
For whosoever eateth leavened bread from the first day until the 7th day, that soul should be cut off from Israel.
Okay, stop right there. So, what does he mean right here when he said you shall remove what? Put away leaven out of your houses.
Sin out your house, out of your mind.
Now, what does he mean right here when he say leaven out of your houses?
Sin.
No. What does he mean here when he said leaven out of your houses?
You mean just removing all of the leaven out of the bread, out of the cabinets, that kind of a thing?
That's exactly what he means. Right here.
Yeast, all of that.
Remember, all of this is, what did I open up this lesson saying? That this is a mikra or what? Or rehearsal. You're rehearsing something. He literally meant at this time to physically remove the leaven out of your house. You want to eat leaven. It's a physical, natural thing right here. Now let's go over to 1 Corinthians. Because remember, there's no golden calf at this time, right? This is still all Melchizedek. But you had these things instituted for a reason.
You said 1 Corinthians, which one?
The 5th chapter. And let's go from 1 to verse 8. And then we're going to stop right there.
It is reported commonly that there is fornication among you, and such fornication as it is not so much as mentioned amongst the Gentiles, that one shall have his father's wife, and you are puffed up, and have not rather mourned, that he that hath done this deed might be taken away from among you. For I verily, as absent in body, but present in the Ruach, have judged already, as though I were present, concerning him that hath so done this deed. In the name of our sovereign Yashra'al Mashiach, when you are gathered together, and my spirit, with the power of our, our mighty one, Yahuwah Yahushua HaMashiach, to deliver such a one into the adversary of Satan for the destruction of the flesh, that the spirit or the rock may be saved in the day of the sovereign. Your glorifying or your esteeming is not good, knowing you that a little leaven leaveneth the whole lump. Purge out therefore the old leaven, that you might be a new lump, as you are unleavened. For even the Mashiach, our Passover, is actually slain or sacrificed for us. Therefore let us keep the feast, not with old leaven, neither with the leaven of malice and wickedness, but with the unleavened bread of sincerity and truth.
The unleavened bread of what?
Sincerity
and
truth.
So right here, what is it talking about? Is it talking about a physical or natural leaven?
No.
So you see how we've shifted from one thing to another? Back under the Melchizedek order when this was instituted, all of this was supposed to be a mikra or rehearsal. What was it rehearsing You removing the leaven from your natural house was to teach you when Hamashiach comes and you're endowed with the Ruach. Now, you're to remove what? The leaven from
Spirit.
your spiritual house. Or you as the man, because you're the house. You are the house now. Now, he's preparing you all that time so you would know when this came, you are the house that now all of these things that represent sin, they should not be in your dwelling. Does that make any sense?
Yeah.
He was prepared. This is why we commemorate. This is why we rehearse the Moedim. It's all about preparing us to be in the right standing, in the right place for when we meet him. That's what it's all about. You got anything more?
Oh, no.
Okay. So, we've covered Pesach, Shavuot, and unleavened. We'll finish up. I promise we'll finish this up next week, then go into Isaiah 53. Because it's so much in this, and you have to be able to see what's going on with Hamashiach when he's washing the feet. You have to see, go back and be able to see what is Abraham actually doing when Yahuwah appears to him with two others. And when they approach him, the first thing he does is what? Go fetch water, remove their sandals, wash their feet. When Hamashiach, Yahushua comes to Peter and comes to him, he comes to him with the same message. And he tells Peter, I must wash your feet.
Right.
If I don't do this, you can have no part with me. You're looking at a whole bunch of covenants. Like as I promised, when we get through with Isaiah 53, I promise you guys, we're going to go into the betrothal. And we're going to look at how a Hebraic marriage works under Yahuwah's system. And you're going to look at all the covenants involved. And you're going to see the culture and the customs. You're going to see all of these betrothal cups and all of these covenants that are progressive in nature. And you have to see how one has to be done and agreed upon before you can go to the next. Done and agreed upon before you can go to the next. And you'll see the different roles that the Ish plays, and you can see the different roles that the Isha plays. But when you begin to see it, you're going to see all this time you've been reading, you're going to see Hamashiach fulfilling a role, and you're going to see the nation of Yashra'al fulfilling a role. So with that being said, we're going to say Shabbat Shalom, and Hallelujah.
I have a couple of questions just to make sure, as Moreh's been doing this lesson again for the last couple of months, and as Moreh said, we're going to be moving to the book of Yashra'al, Isaiah the 53rd chapter, and it should be real easy after everything that Moreh has been talking about. But these festivals are extremely, extremely important. Moreh and Moreh brought out the book of Genesis, or Bereshit, the 15th chapter. Abram was told something very important. After 400 years, it said that they shall come here again. So the question becomes now, what happened at that point where the father now is having this covenant meal with Abram? There was a covenant meal made in Genesis the 15th chapter. And they shall come here again. At what time do you believe that event happened?
Doesn't happen.
Okay. Genesis the 15th chapter, it happened at a time. it said, okay, that after 400 years, you will bring them here again. Now we know in Genesis the 15th chapter, that happened around a particular festival is what I'm trying to get at now. I mean, it's not saying that it was a festival there. But when we begin to put the pieces of the puzzle together, it said now is that you should bring them here again after 400 years. When do you believe that time was? Yashra'al Shavuot. Because when we look at now, from the time Israel, from that point there, that covenant meal was made. So we have now an agreement between the father and Abram, where now we begin to have what we call a relationship. Mm-hmm. Whenever there's a relationship, we see now a connection between the father and the particular individual. Where now Abram's name is no longer Abram, but Abraham. Okay, it's Abraham now. So we have a covenant together between these two individuals. We now have something happening now at Shavuot. Okay, where now they must come to a particular location again. So we have a marriage there, and we have a marriage here at Shavuot. But the only thing now that's a little bit different now is that Moreh had brought out, and we make sure that everybody understands the difference between betrothal and marriage. They usually operate pretty much about the same way. But what's happening now is that under a betrothal, the difference between a betrothal and a marriage is that in the book of Acts, and we see when Israel came out of Egypt, where the groom never tabernacled with the bride. Mm-hmm. But she's still considered married. She's not to go out and have relations or be with any other man, because it's just that there's no intimacy between the two. And we just find it interesting is that the instructions was given to Israel that she don't come up to the mount. Putting all of this together here now is that we had moved from one festival where there were 7 days of unleavened bread. Mm-hmm. But during the time of Shavuot, what type of bread is being used at that time? Leavened bread. Mm-hmm. And so we have now a situation like Moreh was bringing out. When we look at the literal scriptures in Exodus 12 chapter, Israel was not supposed to eat any bread for 7 days. I mean, this is something literally that they needed to do. Mm-hmm. So by the time they got to Shavuot, they should have been prepared and ready now to continue on living this lifestyle of not eating leavened bread. I mean, having any leaven inside of them. Then Moreh had brought out now what happens now in, 1 Corinthians? Yeah, 1 Corinthians, the 15th chapter? The fifth chapter, where we're now supposed to understand why the Mashiach had to come. So once he came now, we're no longer talking about not eating literal bread, but we're not supposed to now have this leaven inside of us. And so this is the only way that we can actually now walk into this Melchizedek order, is not having any leaven inside of us. There's absolutely no way in the world that the Father's going to marry any of us while there's leaven inside of us. It's just not going to happen. So walking this Melchizedek order, or following Exodus, the 20th chapter, just like we had talked about earlier, I mean, remember sometime in the week, yep. What must a man do to, did he say that was in, what was that? That was Matthew?
Yeah, Matthew.
19th chapter, was it? And I just find all this so interesting. I just pray that everybody's paying very close attention. We talked about rehearsals. We talked about remission of sins. We talked about redeeming. None of that was clearly executed under the Levitical order. When I say properly executed, it means that it was only something temporary until the Mashiach came, because the Levitical priesthood brought nothing into perfection at all. And this is what Moreh's been doing with such a great and excellent job. Man, we've been going back and forth and everything like that, going over these scriptures and everything like that, making sure that everybody understands the importance of the Melchizedek or the Melchizedek order.
You want to read that more?
Yes, please.
Matthew 19 and starting at verse 16. It said, and behold, one came and said unto him, Good master, what good thing shall I do that I may have eternal life?
Mhm.
He asked the question.
And everybody here wants that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so if we want this eternal life, okay, Moreh's about to bring up some scriptures here and some verses here where these things that we must do according to the Levitical priesthood.
And he said,
Leviticus.
you said I said the Levitical priesthood?
What verse are we at?
Matthew 19 and 16. I'm on verse 17 now. And he said unto him, why callest thou me good? There is none good but one, that is Yahuwah thy Elohim. He said, but if thou wilt enter into life or eternal life, keep the commandments.
Wow.
You know, he said anything about the law, the Levitical law?
No.
And watch this. Not only did he say it, he said unto him, which Yahushua said, thou shalt do no murder, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not commit adultery, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not bear false witness. Where do we see these things written at?
Wow.
Eternal life, the commandments, the Melchizedek covenant, book of the covenant.
Wow.
Everything all back then was pointing us to
Wow.
this.
Yeah. All of it.
All of it was pointing us to this. Because they were so rebellious and so stiff-necked and hard-headed, because they couldn't refuse to walk in the tent, they broke that covenant no sooner than they entered into it. Now he has to impose a system to kind of force them to what? Walk a straight line. Show them what order should be. And then give them consequences and repercussions for not following what he said.
Absolutely. And that's the reason why Moreh and I, we've been talking, and those of you out there on Facebook and YouTube, is that we're going to have to really make a stand with this whole teachings that we have here that the Father has been bringing to our attention, because a lot of times some of us might be doing Levitical practices and not aware that we're doing these practices here, because a lot of the things that we see that some of our people are doing, you would need a Levitical priest actually to do those things. And being that the Mashiach now is that atoning sacrifice for the nation of Yashra'al, he was able to do now what the other priests, were not able to do. And so that's the reason why Moreh kept bringing out Exodus the 12th chapter, looking at that lamb. That lamb can have any blemishes at all. And it was not about the meat. So we have a lot of people like Moreh and I have been talking about on Pesach now, you have to have a lamb. You have to have a lamb. But when we begin to understand what the Mashiach came to do, he being that lamb, and looking at what happened on the 14th at nighttime, this was something that's supposed to have been a memorial throughout all the generations, us knowing now that there was a woman now, who actually anointed the Mashiach for his burial, him being the lamb, and we were redeemed, because you see this throughout all the scripture, we were redeemed by the blood of the Mashiach. That's how our redemption comes, is through the Mashiach. And the sooner we get that, the better off we'll be. We have to have lamb and all this other stuff. Nah. Yeah, I mean this and just like you said, I mean it's always been about the bread and wine. Moreh brought out the scriptures and everything like that. When he was having the meal with his Talmudim, it was bread and wine. And I pray that everybody understood is that the Mashiach did have to drink a cup or take a cup, but the cup that he had to take, that Peter was not able to take, or even the other 11 wasn't able to take, which was now to die for the nation of Israel. And we all say that we could walk that walk, but when it's time, And everybody here you're going to come to a fork in the road where you're going to have to make that ultimate decision. I've been saying that since day one, because we're going to all be tested, every single last one of us. And when it got to the point, Moreh, when Peter and the 11 said, you know what, we will not deny you, and we're going to walk this whole thing out with you, the Mashiach said, once they smite the shepherd, the sheep are going to scatter. And everybody said that they love the Mashiach. We love the Mashiach. We'll die for you. Those Romans came, man, listen, everybody, when he went that way, everybody scattered and everybody ran. But we all talked a good talk. Everybody talked a good talk. And this is the reason why I want to do a class in the future. Everybody wants to teach. Everybody wants to teach. But in order to teach, you have to be willing now, because we're going to show in Scripture, the shepherd must be willing and at some point lay down his life for the sheep. So there are prerequisites now to teaching. And not everybody wants to do that. Everybody wants to talk the big words and know all the scriptures and things like that, but can you lay your life down for the sheep? That's what the Mashiach did. What was that, Moreh? I think it was in Corinthians. We had talked about it so many times before. The veil. Just hold on one second, Mr. I think it's 2 Corinthians, the 15th chapter. Hold on one second. Because Moreh and I, we've been doing a whole lot of talking while a lot of people are asleep. And I just want to make sure.
And while you finding that, Moreh, let me read some of that.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
Over in Bereshit of Genesis, the 14th chapter, starting at the 18th verse. It said, and Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought forth bread and wine. And he was what? The priest of the Most High, what? Yahuwah Elohim. Remember, there's no such thing as a what? Levitical order, but you do have what? Priest. A Melchizedek order, or what? A priest. And he met Abraham with what? Bread and wine. And it said, and he blessed the Most High Yahuwah, and which hath delivered thine enemies into thy hand, and he gave him tithes and all. So you see a pattern here, because when you read Hebrews, you see that Hamashiach Yahushua is what? He becomes the Melchizedek what?
Priest.
High priest. This is why you hear the conversation like Moreh Kasalba brought out about Yehukanah having a discussion with Hamashiach about him immersing him that all righteousness be fulfilled. Then Yehukanah says unto Hamashiach Yahushua, what did he say? He said, I must decrease that you may what? Or he may increase. You see a changing of the guard or a passing of what?
A priest.
The priesthood.
Hallelujah, absolutely. Okay, Morgan, I'm gonna let you, I'm gonna read it. You just go ahead and edify and make sure that everybody understands what's going on. It's actually 2 Corinthians, the 3rd chapter. Morgan has brought that out so many times before, but we're just gonna read it again. This is 2 Corinthians, the 3rd chapter, and Morgan, you just stop, when you want me to stop, and you can just go ahead and just elaborate on it. Again, 2 Corinthians, the 3rd chapter, verse 1. Shaul is speaking to the Corinthians, and he's saying to the Corinthians, do we begin again to commend ourselves, which is a question, or need we, as some other epistles of condemnation unto you, or letters of condemnation from you? You are our letters written in our hearts, knowing and reading and read of all men. For as much as you are manifestly now declared by the letters of the Mashiach, ministered by us, written not with ink, okay, but with the Ruach of the living Elohim, not in tables of stone, but, or however now, in fleshly tablets of the heart. The Mashiach is going to now give us a heart of flesh and take away the stony heart. Now we have to understand what all of that means. And such trust have we through the Mashiachs toward Elohimward. Not that we are sufficient of ourselves to think anything as of ourselves, but our sufficiency is of Elohim. Verse 6, who has made us able ministers of the renewed covenant, not of the letter, but of the Ruach, or the Spirit, for the letter killeth, but the Spirit giveth life. So we would ask, because Moreh's been doing this lesson, do anybody know what is going on in verse 6?
And what does it mean when it says for the letter killeth, but the Spirit giveth life?
Okay, we're going to help you out here a little bit. Moreh and I had a conversation a couple of nights ago. And what was interesting is that the Pharisees brought to the Mashiach a woman that was caught in adultery. All right, we know that the man wasn't there. Fine, no problem. But the Pharisees brought the woman that was caught in adultery to the Mashiach. And the Mashiach now was able to forgive this woman. Now, the woman actually committed adultery because the Mashiach says to go and sin no more. But what was happening now is that when the Pharisees were in a position now to judge according to the Mosaic law, what the Mashiach did is said, listen, he without sin cast the first stone. So to actually now do the proper judgment, because even the people that was judging the situation, they had problems. So they wasn't even in a rightful position now to actually condemn this woman, even though she committed the act. It took someone greater than the Pharisees who had to walk away, submit their positions to someone that was greater than them. It was the Mashiach that actually forgave the woman. And that woman represents the nation of Yashra'al.
Now, what would the Pharisees have been operating on?
The Levitical law.
The Levitical law.
Wow.
But you see, the Levitical law couldn't do it. Something greater, which we read the scriptures talking about one esteem and something what? Having more esteem.
Esteem to esteem.
Or something having, something being glorious, but something else being what, even or more glorious. I'm trying to say without just telling you, see if you know.
Sorry, say that again.
When we look at the book of Hebrews, it speaks of the Melchizedek and Hamashiach saying if he had been what? A priest on earth, then it goes into talking about since there was a change in what?
Order.
Right.
There need to be a change in what else?
In the law.
In the law. And when we look back at these things, it speaks about something being glorious. But it also makes mention of something being, if that were glorious, how much more glorious would this something else be?
Let me read it. It's
Yes.
right here. So now, who has made us now able ministers of, it has here New Testament, not of the letter, but of the Ruach, because the letter, now it killeth, but this, okay, I'll just read it the way that it is. But the Spirit giveth life. But if the ministration of death written and engraven in stones was glorious, so that the children of Israel could not steadfastly behold the face of Moses for the glory of his countenance, which glory was to be done away. How should not the ministration of the Spirit be rather glorious? But if the ministration of condemnation be glory, much more doeth the ministration of righteousness exceed in glory. I must decrease so that he must increase. Remember that. For even that which was made glorious hath no glory in this respect, by reason of the glory that excelleth. Let's expound on that, Moreh. For even that which was made glorious had no glory in this respect, by reason of the glory that excelleth. Okay, we read on. For if that which is done away was glorious, much more that which remaineth is glorious. Seeing then that we have such hope, we use great plainness of speech, and not as Moses, which put a veil over his face, that the children of Israel could not steadfastly look to the end of that which is abolished. So if we go to the book of Matthew, that talks about, think not that I come to destroy the law, I come to fulfill. I come not to destroy, but fulfill. And it talks about now, were there some things that were accomplished through the death and resurrection of the Mashiach? Was anything now abolished at the death of the Mashiach? Because a lot of times you hear a lot of our Hebrew brothers, they say that, you know what, they're not looking at that particular scripture for what it really is, but the Mashiach's death did end, okay, something that Israel was under, and now bringing us now to life, because there was a death sentence put upon the woman. And if the Mashiach didn't come and die, we will still be under that death penalty. So there was something that the Mashiach did accomplish through his death and resurrection. When you go to the book of Romans, the 7th chapter, it talks about when the Mashiach died, we died. Okay, and so when he resurrected, we're now resurrected into new beings, where now what we were under the Mosaic, and Moreh, he'll expound upon that. There were some things that that Moses instituted under Aaron. We're no longer under that anymore.
And what the Romans 7, if you'll find it strange when what Moreh was just speaking about and being resurrected, and when it said that they could be resurrected or were resurrected, it goes straight into talking about what? Marriage.
Absolutely.
You could marry what? Hamashiach. I think it's around Romans 7 and 5, I believe.
Yes, it is.
Or somewhere around there.
Romans the 7th chapter, we start at verse 1. It says, Know ye not, brethren, for I speak to them that know the law, how that the law have dominion over a man as long as he liveth. For the woman which hath an husband is bound by the law to her husband so as long as he liveth. But if the husband be dead, she is loose from the law of the husband. So then, if while her husband liveth, she is married to another man, she should be called an adulteress. But if her husband be dead, she is free from the law, so that she is no adulteress. So that's the reason why Moreh had brought out in Exodus the 12th chapter. When, before the Mashiach came, before he came, and Moreh had asked now, when it talks about having no leaven in your house, what does that mean? Israel was not supposed to do anything outside of what that scripture said. You were not supposed to have any leaven in your house. You were under that law. You had to do that. But the death and resurrection of the Mashiach freed you from that. So we're no longer talking about, all right, when Pesach comes, you know what? Every brother, sister in the congregation, what you have to do now is look at the back of every single ingredient in your house and say, listen, you know what? Oh, this has leaven in it, this has leaven in it, this has, and throw everything out of your house. We're not under that law. Nobody should be teaching that. Nobody. We're not under that law. What the law that we're under now is that we're talking about not having leaven inside of us. Because for 40 years in the wilderness, what the Father was trying to do, he was trying to build a house, and you was that house. That was the house that he was trying to build. And what was so interesting now about the feast days is that we were such a corruptible people. Such a corruptible people is that during Pesach, we're not supposed to have any leaven, even inside of us. But by the time the Shavuot came, we're now dealing with the house of Israel, where they now had leaven. But the father or the groom can't tabernacle with the woman that has leaven inside of her. But the bread represents the leaven. This is the reason why when you look at the temple services, and we're just going to touch on the temple services where you have now the 6 loaves on this side, 6 loaves on this side. You had the sweet savior of incense on top of the bread. You had the wine ceremony, and then you had the altar of incense. You had the ark, the menorah. All these things now was in the first curtain, and then after that you had the Holy of Holies. But just to share now was that the bread had leaven in it. Leaven. The woman, like Moreh said now, when you go to Ezekiel the 16th chapter, when the Father found Israel, not just women, men too, we were whores. Filthy. He found Israel in a corruptible state. You was bloody, and these are derogatory terms.
Yeah.
Your mother's a Hittite and your father's an Amorite. In other words, you are a whore, you are a bee. This is what you are. You're filthy. A filthy whore is what we were. And there's no way in the world that any man wants to bring to his father a woman that's a whore. Who wants to do that? How would you feel if your sons brought a whore to you? I can't bring nothing like that to mine. Nah. This woman, once she's presented to the Father, because there's going to come a point where everything goes back to the Father. When it goes back to the Father, that woman can't have any blemishes at all. None. So why are we now under, push this Levitical law? Why are we doing that? Let me just finish this up. I don't want to hold nobody up. But Moreh and I, we have been doing some talking. We just want to make sure that everybody is under the right understanding of what's going on here so that there's no problems, because as thorough as Moreh has been going over this, there should be no problems.
Let me read it, finish
Sure.
that 4th verse, man. It's
Okay.
a wherefore, my brethren. That's Romans 7:4. It's a wherefore, my brethren. You are also become dead to the law by the body of Hamashiach, that ye should be what? Married.
Wow.
To another, even to him who is raised from the dead.
Where's that?
Romans 7:4.
Okay.
Okay, we just finish this up, and Moreh, you can just expound upon it, because you and I, we've talked about this so much. We're back in 2 Corinthians, the 13th verse. We're almost done. The 12th verse. Seeing that we have such hope, we use great plainness of speech, and not as Moses, which put a veil over his face, that the children of Yashra'al could not steadfastly look to the end of that which is abolished. So we have to understand, what was it that's abolished? We're not saying that the 10 was abolished, so we're not telling nobody to commit adultery. We're not telling nobody to move anybody's landmarks. We're not telling anybody that you can eat pork or anything like that. We're talking about what actually now brings a man and a woman into relationship with the Mashiach, and all of that is listed in the 10. So watch this now. but their minds were blinded for until this day. Okay, we're talking about even to this very day here, but their minds were blinded for until this day remaineth the same veil untaken away. In the reading of the Old Testament, which veil is done away in the Mashiach. So, Moreh, you just stop me at any time you want to expound on anything.
It's explained itself.
Okay. But even unto this day, when Moses is read, the veil is upon their heart. Nevertheless, when it shall, or when that person, the it is describing a person, nevertheless, when they shall return to the Father, the veil shall be taken away. So when you listen, I mean, again, we're not mocking any other mores or teachers. We're not doing that. That's not what we're doing. Only thing that we're sharing now is that out of ignorance. There's a lot of things that I've done out of ignorance. And the word ignorant only means that you're not aware of the situation. It doesn't mean that you're stupid or dumb or anything like that. The word ignorance just means that you're not aware of it. But once a person comes to the full understanding of Torah, what the veil over the face of Moses meant when Moses came down off of the mountain, and what we have here now, Shaul expounding to the people, he's telling us now that when you come to the full understanding of Torah, that veil is done away in the Mashiach. Now, the Ruach is that spirit. And where the spirit of Yahuwah is, there is liberty. That's the reason why Shaul has spoke. He said, listen, you know what? Who has bewitched you, O Galatians, now? Because what's happening now is that when Shaul gave these Galatians now the understanding of Torah, we had the Pharisees now that came right behind Shaul now and brought them right back under bondage again. So who has bewitched you? What the Pharisees were not able to understand now is that, you know what, the coming of the Mashiach, this is the reason why Caiaphas and that illegitimate priesthood now tried to kill the Mashiach, because if they would have known what the death of the Mashiach, it accomplished so much. Accomplished so much. And this is the reason why the Mashiach always spoke now. He said, listen, and we're not going to go to the whole 3 times and everything like that, what that actually means. But just to share now is that the Mashiach had to take that cup. And that cup now was to drink that cup of the adulterous woman, dying for her and bringing her back into covenant relationship with the Father again. Verse 18, but we all with open face beholding as in a glass the esteem of the Father are changed in the same image from esteem to esteem, even as the Ruach of Elohim. 2 more verses, then we're done. I'll be done. Therefore, seeing we have this ministry, again, therefore seeing that we have this ministry, as we have received mercy, we faint not, but have renounced the hidden things of dishonesty, not walking in craftiness, nor handling the word of Elohim deceitfully, but by the manifestation of the truth, commending ourselves to every man's consciousness in the sight of Elohim. But if our good news or gospel be hid, it is hid to them that are lost. So I just wanted to I'll end that there. It's just that, again, Moreh and I have been doing a whole lot of talking, and I pray that everybody has a full understanding about now what the death and resurrection of the Mashiach actually accomplished here.
And when you read this with the book of Hebrews, it should give you a thorough understanding what Hebrews is saying and why it's being worded and saying what it's saying, because you're seeing from this, it's matching and giving you an understanding about how Mashiach, his role, become the Melchizedek. Because, you only deal with the actual term Melchizedek or Melchizedek in 2 books, Genesis and Hebrew. I think that's on 2, or is it Psalms also?
Yeah, it's talking in Psalms.
Okay, Genesis, Hebrew, and Psalms. But when you look at the entire book or the scripture, it's all about the Melchizedek.
That's right.
But we've been so much law the entire time till it's hard to get people to see what's really going on. There was a priesthood before the Levitical. What was this priesthood? Why, when you read the scriptures, there are certain individual or select individuals who the Most High is calling righteous, and looking at them, you see them doing or serving Yahuwah.
That's right.
They are appointed over the people.
Mm.
Hallelujah. Was Moreh that you have anything else, Moreh?
No, that's about it. We'll let it go from there. Because we'll be here all night. Yeah, but
Yeah. But that's so true. I mean, we used to get into these, the Moedim like this. I remember one year at 11, man, I threw so much of my beer away. I mean, let me tell you something. You know, it's made from hop and wheat.
yeah.
So it has 11. And I'm talking about imports.
Mm.
I'm talking some expensive beers. No, it's not a sin to drink a beer. Facebook, YouTube, and but because they contain 11, I'm talking about case upon case upon case. The toothpaste, if it had baking soda or something, it had to go. I mean, just that house was clean, so we thought, and still going to work though on a 9 to 5. You probably attracting all kind of leaven back up in the house, physical leaven, crumbs and everything else. It is one of the things, you know, like, wait a minute. But that's what we did. But once the Most I bring you into the understanding, you know, you begin to seek out and do better. But with that being said, we're going to continue the last part of this next week. I promise you next week is the last part. And then we're going to get into the Isaiah 53. And after that, we're going to go back over the betrothal or the marriage ketubah. So if there's not anything else, we're going to stand at this time and we're going to turn and face the east again. And Moreh can blow the shofar if he wants to. If not, we're going to pray out. And Slomo is going to pray us out and pray with the food.
Aliyahu, I just want to come and thank you again for another set apart Shabbat. Thank you for what the Morehs have taught us today. I pray that you write upon our hearts and commit it to our memories. That way we can carry out throughout this week with what they have said through you. I pray that you remove the leaven out of our houses and that you help us to always have that goal of remembering the 10 and trying to keep the commandments. That way we can stay in your under your grace and under you. Pray that you prove the food, work the hands who made it, and that it fills our stomachs. Your son set apart name, Aliyahu.
Hallelujah.
Right, right.